You went to a party 5 years ago and you ate some food, and 5 years later, your stomach is upset, and you're like, I wonder if it was that food I ate 5 years ago at that party.
Dr. Jonathan Bakhtari.
You can see it. I mean, it's crystal clear.
I think it's going to really revolutionize things.
Which is a big game changer.
Hi, welcome to another episode of Bakhtari MD. Today, we want to talk about how to prepare for the next pandemic. As a matter of fact, I just published an op-ed piece in the Toronto Star, and the title was, "This Won't Be the Last Pandemic. Here's How We Can Prepare for Disease X." And I'll provide a link to that op-ed down below, but I want to go over some of my thoughts that I put in this op-ed piece and also some additional stuff that I want to talk about. Because in order to prevent the next one or deal with the next one, we have to understand how we got here. As I mentioned in my op-ed piece, that their main risk factors for new contagious diseases by far is the animal to human transmission. And to the extent that we can start addressing that globally, it will minimize the chances of further pandemics. One major issue is deforestation, which by definition brings animals closer to populations and increases the interaction. That's, I guess, somewhat a natural thing that's going to happen as we get population growth. But it is something that we need to be mindful of about this interaction between animals and humans. Other things that we have to be concerned about is how we interact with wild animals, whether it's in a market or in other environments. We need to be cognizant of that. And of course, even in laboratories, if anyone's doing experimentation with infectious diseases in animals, to understand the potential dangers and precautions that need to be taken. So all of those are ways that we can think about it. If you assume the vast majority of the infectious diseases are going to come from animals to humans, then we have to obviously address that and what we can do to mitigate those risks. It would be foolish to think that we can have as much interaction with wild animals and also in the environment, but also in a laboratory setting. So we have to be very, very careful and understand the potential risks from that. Then the next thing that I talked about in this article was how to better prepare for it. And I think how to better prepare for it really involves understanding what we did during this pandemic. We were fortunate enough that we had the mRNA technology sitting on the shelf for, at least a decade. And to a certain extent, this really put a gun to our head to force us to roll out this technology. I suspect it would have taken much longer to roll out mRNA technology for vaccinations had this pandemic not occurred. Which kind of makes you think, what other technologies are we shying away from? Because we're saying our vaccine technology is good enough. We don't need to improve it. And obviously, we found out from this pandemic that it's not good enough. That there are better ways to make vaccines and help people. In retrospect, the 800,000 people that died in the U.S. and growing, and the millions of people that died worldwide. Maybe for the next pandemic, if there are things we can do to get vaccines out to people quicker, faster, would literally save hundreds and millions of lives. So I think understanding that whole process and what it takes to get these vaccines out to people in response to a pandemic is really important. So a couple of things. mRNA technology, if I hear one more time that this mRNA technology was rushed and wasn't studied well enough, I don't know what. But at the end of the day, even if that was true, as I've said in my previous videos, it's now been studied enough. It's been studied on over 200 million people in the US and millions worldwide. And we followed it now for a year. That's the world's largest clinical study ever on anything almost. So the whole idea that it wasn't studied enough. And then people say, well, about the long-term side effects of vaccines. People say, I want to know long-term side effects of an ulcer medicine I'm taking every day for a year or 2 years or 3 years. But that's because you're taking the medication every day for 3 years. So we do need to know what happens if you take the same pill every day for 4 or 5 years. Will there be a sort of a build-up side effect to taking a medication that long? But vaccines, essentially, for the most part, are 1 or 2 or 3 and done. The vaccine disintegrates in 48 hours. So it's not like 3 years from now, the vaccine is going to be circulating in your system. It will have an impact on your immune system, which is very natural. And to that extent, you'll have that response. But this whole idea that until we get a vaccine and we give it to someone and watch them for 5 years and see nothing bad happens to them 5 years later, while theoretically it's possible, it's unlikely that something, as I joked around, it's like, you went to a party 5 years ago and you ate some food and 5 years later your stomach is upset and you're like, I wonder if it was that food I ate 5 years ago at that party. I mean, I guess it's possible, but it's very unlikely. So I think we need to get past, for practical purposes, quote unquote, long-term side effects of a vaccine you got 5 years ago or 3 years ago. Now, immediate, short-term, even moderate to short-term side effects are very reasonable to want to fully evaluate. And I think this past year and a half of looking at these vaccines have, especially the mRNA vaccines, have given us the answers to what the risks are. And there are small risks, and we have a good handle on them. Even the myocarditis risk in younger men, we have a better understanding of them. So there are risks. It's not completely, there's nothing. And aspirin has side effects. Everything that you might take as a medicine or a biologics may have a side effect. But this idea of quote unquote long-term side effects is, while possible, very unlikely. So given that mRNA technology has now been essentially well studied, given the millions of people that have gotten in, we followed it out for years. We need to take advantage of that, and not only take advantage of technology, but how do we get it to market, and how do we literally mass produce it? We certainly have to get away from this concept that 1 or 2 places are going to manufacture the world's vaccine supply like it currently exists. And I talk about that in the op-ed piece. We can't have the bulk of our vaccines made in one company in India or in another place. We need to diversify the supply chain and have the vaccines manufactured in multiple continents and be able to bring it to market quickly. As the risk factors that I talked about earlier grow, as we get more and more contact, it's going to be even more likely another pandemic will hit. So if that is the case, then we also have to turn our eye towards dealing with one once it comes. So I think we've learned a lot from that, but a lot from the pandemic that we can really now use for the next potential pandemic. One of the things I think we have to get away from is understanding that to bring a vaccine to market cannot take 6 to 9 to 12 months. If we can plan ahead and understand what we're going to do and how long it's going to take to actually, let's say, sequence a potential virus, have the laboratories create the mRNA vaccine for it, and then get it into production lines all over the world and get it to the market with minimal bureaucratic involvement. Although safety is important, we need to make sure that even future mRNA vaccines or even newer technologies are safe. But we have to balance that safety versus the risk of people dying. And to that extent, you can wait until you have the ultimate reassurance that a vaccine is safe, but that extra time that gives you that extra 5-10% reassurance may literally cause millions of people to die. So like in everything in medicine, it's a cost-benefit analysis. If we're fairly comfortable to 80-95% certainty, then sometimes as a society, we have to make a decision that we're comfortable enough and doing nothing or waiting longer will for sure cost lives, and pull the trigger and move ahead. I think these are things that now we can actually calibrate and calculate what the risk of waiting to get every bureaucrat to sign off on every aspect of a new vaccine may have a price, and we need to understand what that price is. I mean, the one thing we can say is we've had over 825,000 deaths in the United States, millions worldwide. How many of those deaths were in the fully vaccinated population? And that's minimal. The 90% plus of all the people that have died of COVID are unvaccinated. So, you can talk about breakthrough cases and it doesn't prevent this, it doesn't prevent that. But so far, it is preventing death with a high degree. So even a vaccine that's not perfect, if it can reduce your chances of dying tenfold or 15-fold or 20-fold, that's pretty effective vaccine. Even if you do get sick, even if you do come down with a milder form, as long as you don't get hospitalized, as long as you don't die, that's a success. So that's the other thing. Do we want to wait for like the perfect vaccine that doesn't cause any breakthrough cases? You never get sick, you never catch the illness. And if you don't find me that vaccine, I'm not taking it. I think I see a lot of people saying, aha, you see, this really proves it. See, these vaccines don't really work because, oh, look at all these breakthrough cases. But again, look at the people who are dying. Are they vaccinated or are they unvaccinated? And if that's your marker of success, that logic doesn't really make sense. And then as a side note about mRNA technology, this ability to get your body to produce specific proteins by giving the genetic sequence of it to a person has implications in other infectious diseases that we've been unable to make a dent in, like malaria, because malaria is a parasite, not a virus or a bacteria. Very difficult to make a traditional vaccine for that, and that causes hundreds of thousands of deaths annually, as well as cancer. For example, cancers have very specific proteins that they produce, and if we can get you to develop antibodies towards those proteins by giving you an mRNA vaccine, theoretically, we could actually get your own body to fight cancer cells and help defeat cancer. These are sort of the new frontier that mRNA technology may be able to address in theory. So I think mRNA technologies and newer technologies in vaccine production for infectious diseases and cancer have the promise to save millions and millions and millions of lives in the decades to come. So as I've said before, if there's any silver lining, and there isn't many, in this pandemic, it has really forced newer technologies to the surface that hopefully in the future will save even more lives than we've lost in this pandemic. If you've been watching Bakhtari MD, you know that we go over a lot of healthcare content that's meant to educate you, give you insight, and overall, have you better prepared to deal with healthcare in general. What I'd like to do is something very new and unique. I want our listeners and our viewers, if they like, to send me specific challenges and episodes that has happened to them involving their interaction with healthcare professionals, the medical world, hospitals, doctors, radiology centers, what have you. So send me your stories, and what I will do is I'll do an episode where I'll react to them and give you my insight in generic terms. No, I'm not going to name any names or people or hospitals, but in generic, what your situation was, how you dealt with it, and what you really want to know that might have been going on behind the scenes. And I'll do my best. So just send those. Go to BakhtariMD.com, go to the contact button, and just send me your story, and we'll grab them and we'll try to, give you our sort of behind the scenes of what we think may have happened, and give you some more clarity and insight. It'll be a lot of fun in terms of, even episodes that were not serious, but you just wanted to know the background. Of course, if they are serious, we'll also address them. But I want you guys to have more color and texture to some of these interactions that you may have been exposed to. So let's try that. Send them in, and we will respond. Thank you so much. BakhtariMD.com, contact button and send us your info. So I provided the link for my op-ed piece in the Toronto Star below. So if you get a chance, click that link and watch it. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. If you have more questions about this topic or any other topics you want me to go over, please leave it in the comments section below. Also, make sure you check out my website, Bakhtari MD, and also sign up for my newsletter for more healthcare topics. And as usual, thank you and be well.